So either we need to throw all scaling out the window, or the gods are still relevant. Let's pick our poison. What's up, guys? That guy with a pencil here. Fun fact, I do to have it on me and keep it on me at all times. Fun fact, here we are to do a breakdown and review of chapter 237 of Four Knights of the Sorry, the unexpected meeting. And I will say this. As a guy who's been scaling sevendeadlysins for over half a decade now, which is insane to think about. Sweet mother of mercy, brother. I spent more time scaling sevendeadlysins than I spent on my undergraduate degree. That's insane! But regardless, as a guy who's scaling sevendeadlysins for a while, one of the main things that I've kind of like, it's been there in the back of my mind, but it's never like reached to the forefront and torn through fully. It only pops up on occasion, and it's like in one specific discussion, is the vagueness of the original series to Four Knights itself. It's one of those things where it feels like Nakaba had gone specifically out of his way to make it just as vague and awkward and weird as possible. That like you couldn't like the two are obviously linked because one's a sequel to the other, but power scaling wise, it's very like. Obviously, we had the multiple different statements that Lance, before we got to see crazier Lance feats, was on the same level as the sevendeadlysins. But like, what does that even mean when you have base Diane, who at the time didn't really have too many feats, you know, base Diane and True Magic Mel both being sevendeadlysins here, or if you are a hater. Like, I occasionally Gother and True Magic Mel, or Gother and Bond, and Gother and even Full Wings King. Yeah, the gap's that big between those two characters alone. And if you know how big the gap is between Full Wings King and Bond, and Full Wings King and Mel, like, it's wild. But that's technically sevendeadlysins here. We didn't really have we didn't have an idea of what that really meant when everyone was saying, oh, Lance is sevendeadlysins here. Then we got at least examples for that. But even then, there's also weirdness. Like, why does base Carther exist? And where does he scale? Because unfortunately, at the time, we didn't really get to see much of dual Black Skelwer Chaos-eyed, what we thought at the time was King Arthur. Because by the time he popped it out, you know, Chaos was popping out, and then he immediately left. So, like, we didn't actually get to scale to that, like, how much that was relevant to the end of the original series. One of the biggest debates that's kind of been lingering from the original series alone, not even talking about the sequel series stuff, is like, hey, the gods! And by the gods, I mean, like, the Supreme Deity and the Demon King, specifically. What's up with them? Personally, I was always in the camp that they were relevant still, right? Like, you weren't just going to, in spite of insane Four Knights power creep, it wasn't really going to be the case that the gods were just absolutely left behind and they didn't even scale at all to the Chaos family. I always thought there was some relativity there based on the view that the Supreme Deity and the Demon King working together actually could seal Chaos. But a lot of people point out the idea of like, well, we don't know what the context of that sealing was. We don't know what Chaos was even thinking of at the time with the whole idea of it being a will without will. We don't know if they off-guarded it. We don't know when they ganked it, how they ganked it, whether or not that was before or after the creation of the Ten Commandments and the Four Archangels respectively. Like, it presumably was before, because it'd be kind of insane for the half-power gods to work together to seal their crit. Like, there's a whole bunch of weird stuff around that, and that's just original series exclusive stuff. And of course, we did have the lingering effects of that going into, hey, where do certain characters now scale to the gods if we think the gods don't scale at all to the Chaos family? Like, it is a whole mess in that alone. And once again, Naka was just being really, really vague. Like, the Chaos Commandments. Galland says he's stronger than ever before, and Escanor couldn't even scratch him. But does Galland have accurate, like, scaling for Escanor, especially by the Escanor that he was thinking of versus the Escanor of the end of the original series? Like, I've talked about this many times before. You can only find the video on the channel where I mentioned that Final Shine Escanor, aka the Escanor in the Demon King fight. I'm not talking about the one, and I'm not talking about the one ultimate. Final Shine Escanor is the term I coined for the Escanor that's in the Prime Demon King fight, who has feats that puts him way above literally previous undeniable top tiers. When not even an arc ago, he was Zeldris food. Commandmentless Zeldris food. The previous arc, like, legitimately, that was a whole mess. And of course, we didn't really get a statement surrounding that. We just had the vague assertion that Galland believed that Escanor couldn't even scratch him now. Cool story, bro. I don't know if I buy that. And then, once again, it just kept getting vaguer and vaguer and vaguer and vaguer. We just didn't really have anything. Even once we started to get things, it was still, like, weird. Like, how does the scaling work out between the Sins and Kath? Because Mel and Bond were bullying him. But then suddenly he was strong enough to fight AM Mel, even though he was being bullied by Base Mel and then Demon Rider. Like, it's really, really vague and funky and weird. And it is admittedly what makes Fortnite's scaling and discussions interesting in the first place. The idea that you can have 50 million different interpretations based on Nakaba deciding to sprinkle feed us some info and then not sprinkle feed us some info and just be really, really vague about everything. It's honestly more fun when a series is like that, I would say. It is a little bit tedious when you're trying to, like, figure out a meta. Just the inverse. Heaven forbid, we didn't really have to touch cross-verse stuff all too much for Seven Deadly Sins. The only, funnily enough, everyone on the cross-verse side of Seven Deadly Sins has just been eating. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack on the side. We got the World Beyond, a separate 4D realm confirmed to be made by a character, unlike Purgatory for the longest time, something that I was always pushing against. But hey, World Beyond, infinite space, different time flow than the main universe. We know it was created by Chaos. Bada bing, bada boom, 4D Chaos. Or at least pooped out a realm that is 4D. Like, definitely we got that. Obviously, we had the infinite magic statements of infinite power stuff. Hardline confirmed with the Lady of the Lake and Lance wielding all that. Like, we got stuff. And obviously, we had more and more and more, like, insane things like, you know, multi-galactic, or at bare minimum multi-solar, but realistically multi-galactic Cath. And by proxy, Arthur, or what we thought was Arthur that ended up being Cath because of the whole seeing stars in just one singular realm of Camelot. And Nakaba's statement from the external materials talking about how some realms in Camelot have no stars at all, but some are filled with starry night skies. And we know Camelot was created within a relatively short time period by Cath and, or presumably Arthur, and then maybe Cath took him over. We still don't really have a solid timeline on that. Essentially, scaling in Fortnite has been a mess. And do you think this chapter makes it better? And I'm saying that to not just you, but also to me. You're gonna have to do some mental loops, some gymnastics, some backflips. But luckily enough, I do think the chapter is clear enough that I can see people going with Route 1. We need to throw out all the scaling we have, and we need to redo everything. But then there's Route 2, the route I've kind of always stood on, and the route I'm excited to discuss. The gods were always relevant. The idea that they didn't scale to the Chaos Assembly at all was kind of nonsense. But we'll see. We have a lot to talk about. Let's always see more time. Let's hop right into chapter 237, The Unexpected Meeting. But of course, before I actually hop into that, because I'm holding off even longer, you want to check out the 30-minute, because man, I was going back and forth with this with myself in the live reaction, the 30-minute live reaction to this very chapter. You can check it out for $1 a month if you become a patron, or $3 a month if you become a member. It's literally going to be up at the same time. But boom, you want to check out and support your boy. You get live reactions to every single Fortnite chapter that drops. It's delicioso. But with it being the case, hopping into the chapter itself, we see Escanor stomping towards our four knights. And he is actually leaving indents in the ground. This Escanor is big, he's hefty, he's older than Rita. Yeah, he looks nice, jacked, and juicy. Now, obviously, there is the very, very hilarious thing that while we, I'm not speaking French, W-E, we know Escanor. Yeah, Percy and Gawain have no context for who this man is. Not a lick. And they're both like, hey, who's this guy? And Gawain actually asks, where did he come from even? Which is hilarious because you're in Camelot. Where did he come from? I don't know. Where did the building that you walked into come from, Gawain? Where did all those monsters and things that you and only you were seeing in the very last chapter come from, Gawain? Probably Camelot magic. But with it being the case, both of them have no context for who Escanor is and can't even recognize him. We're going to talk about that a lot in chapter 2. A very sad element of Gawain and her uprising and upbringing is that she didn't really have any context for her father. None at all. Like, she really didn't know the man. Even though she did really know the man because he did take part in raising her. He did play the role of grandfather, though. So she never actually had a solid reference for what her father looked like. And even hearing her father is Escanor, it's not like she had the anime downloaded into her brain or something. Cool. She may have seen one image of Escanor, maybe. Considering, you know, pictures aren't exactly a thing at this time, and she was raised in Camelot, where the Seven Deadly Sins were not the nicest or well-treated of people. So she didn't really have any reference for her father, and that's sad to see that she can't even recognize him. But, of course, while they didn't get the entire Seven Deadly Sins animated in 4K Ultra HD quality, two of these characters here did. As Lance goes, I sure know. And Tristan goes, he looks like the man from the memory scope that showed us as kids. And I do like that Nakaba remembers that. It does feel like sometimes, like, there was a moment earlier on in the manga where it almost felt like that, if not retconned, I feel like Nakaba forgot that he did that. But yeah, Lance and Tristan both got free data dumps from Gother, basically on the entire original series. It's actually one of my favorite panels from the original series, seeing 10-year-old Tristan, I think he was 10 at the time, I think it was his 10th birthday in the final chapter, but essentially, seeing young Tristan get those memories is one of my favorite panels because it shows some of the most iconic moments in really cool ways. But they got the whole anime downloaded into their head, they got the manga, basically, and they recognize Escanor. which is hilarious because I have no real context for him other than, oh yeah, that's Escanor. And we see Tristan go, Escanor, the lion's sin of pride, heralded as the most powerful of the 7 deadly sins. And I already know some Escanor fans are going to run with this. I'm sorry. Heralded doesn't mean factual. And we obviously know this is just wrong. You could go, this is just wrong for 2 levels. You could either pretend Final Shine doesn't exist and Prime DK Fight Escanor doesn't exist and say he's like Zelda's food still, outside of the one where, congratulations, you're not Zelda's food for 1 minute. Whoop-de-doo. Or you go, Final Shine exists, cool story, bro, AM Mel. True magic Mel. If you're feeling real, like if you think AM ain't enough, though AM is clearly enough. Heck, the one ultimate Escanor was literally intercepted by what? Base Mel? TM Mel? And remember, Mel was sandbagging and mentally, like, not limited, but essentially he was not confident and didn't really want to hurt Zeldris, and we know directly that your willingness to fight does affect your combat capacity. So, like, that was a mental nerf Mel who was still reacting to the one ultimate Escanor. So, like, we still got juicy stuff for that Mel being way above Escanor. So now, Escanor fans, while he was heralded as the most powerful of 7 deadly sins, he wasn't actually. He was number 2, pretty undebatably. Like, once again, you have some people, and we'll talk about it in a bit, some people going into the ultimate goon level and, like, be like, oh, Escanor's fodder because he didn't make it to the cap fight. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. I've always been very iffy on that, even if I, quote-unquote, I'm not even going to say quote-unquote, did sort of accept that the gods were relevant, but we're going to get to that in a second. As we see, the Escanor say a statement I'm pretty sure was in last chapter 2, going, show me the blood of the boar's sin of gluttony, and I will grant you the truth. Anyone impudent enough to come here with... Well, I don't know why. I struggled to read this in live reaction too, but anyone impudent enough to come here while unqualified will face hopeless death. Note that specifically, right? Hopeless death. So this Escanor, obviously a copy, as is noted in a second, but this Escanor is essentially here to purge anybody who isn't Gawain. Now, of course, this does raise the question of how many people even got here, considering, you know, Gawain was the whole reason they were able to even get through that tower in the first place, and then actually get through that weird, magical, weird, strange dimension place that Gawain was leading them through last chapter, and then here. So, like, this Escanor is the final of final walls, but essentially this Escanor should, if not be bloodlusted, fighting all out at its current capacity as it's manifested here, right? Let's think about that, because it literally says, and we know it's not the real Escanor, it literally says, hey, if you've come here, arrogant and foolish enough to do this, you will just die. So, it should be trying to kill him. But with it being the case, we see that Gawain is absolutely bamboozled to hear this speaking and be like, this is, it's my dad? Which, yes. But no, not at all. As Lens quickly explains, no, the man died 18 years ago. It's likely a hollow figure crafted with Camelot's force to guard this place. And that is, yeah, actually what it is. But in that case, it does make me wonder, is Escanor's soul still trapped in that puppet? Like, we know Merlin was remote controlling her little doll that she was using as grandma to help raise and train Gawain. But, like, is Escanor still just stuck with Kay? And maybe Dubs? Because, I don't know, for some reason Dubs did not make any sacred treasures. It's just Percival. And Percival's crew that get sacred treasures. Oh, well, happy day. But regardless, is he good? Because why would you not summon his soul out to maybe inhabit this vessel? Maybe it's like some weird doesn't want to risk infusing his soul in the Camelot stuff. Maybe it's literally impossible. We don't know. But it is an interesting point that Lance brings up that, yeah, this isn't the real one. And it's not even, it's like a facsimile of a facsimile. It's not even like the real soul implanted into a body to resemble the prime of Escanor's life. It's just the hollow puppet. But with it being the case, because, once again, I feel like half of this is intentional scaling by Nakaba, and half of this is just like the stupidity of these characters. We see that Tristan goes, well, it's a well-made fake, to be sure, but I'm not about to lose to an illusion. Oh, Tristan. Oh, Tristan. Oh, Tristan, I wish I could take your word for anything, buddy. But he does essentially say, yeah, I'm going to absolutely violate this thing. And obviously, Percy, who has... Now, like, Tristan, I will give a... No, in fact, no, I can give Tristan no pass. I was about to say, I'll give him a fractional pass. No, Percy is a fractional pass, because he doesn't know who this man is. He has no clue. He has no clue for who, What's an Escanor? How's an Escanor? Why? He has no context for that man. So I'm gonna give Percy a pass. Tristan, you have the memories downloaded into your brain, bro. Why do you do what you're about to do? But regardless, both the funnily enough, Percival is our main character, but like what feels like if there's an A team and a B team, the two head members of the B team essentially draw their weapons, draw their blades, and get ready to lock in. As Percy says, okay, let's beat this guy and get over to Merlin ASAP. And they both lunge in. Now, I have a question for you before we get into this. Where do you think base, and let me repeat this, base Tristan and no magic or Percy scale? So essentially the two base, most purest base level of these characters, where do you think they scale? Personally, I said I did that first. Personally, Percy, but regardless, personally, I have base Tristan scaling basically where that man's kind of a bum. He's kind of fodder. I'm not gonna lie to you. He really needs to hop into them demon marks. He needs to hop into them. God is supposed to do anything, but he does lunge at Escanor in base, which is why I can't give him an excuse. And Aurelus, no magic Percy, I mean, like, his hacks are still cracked, but I don't think he has like the craziest skilling out there either. Like, presumably they're just still above probably the Chaos Commandments, if I had to hazard a guess, just based on, you know, them. At least Tristan probably bare minimum got 2 times stronger, or possibly even 4 times stronger over the years. So maybe that's why he leaps so confidently at this Escanor in base. And Percy in base was able to keep up with Worldane. The initial base case had Worldane. Obviously, he couldn't keep up with the Super Worldane, but still, like, I don't think these characters scale all too high. And keep that in mind, right? This Escanor is swinging with the intent to provide hopeless death to anyone impudent enough to come here without the right credentials. And immediately, as they both lunge in with a very beautiful panel, mind you, I do love the idea of Escanor being like literally 3 of them. Like, you could throw in another Tristan in here and they match one of his thighs maybe. But I do like the massive contrast of the big gargantuan burly man and these two lunging in together, because these two have an interesting dynamic. I wish it was explored a bit more, but we'll see probably more of it soon enough. As we see Gawain go, wait, all of you. That was awful. Wait, all of you. And we immediately see Escanor look very, very annoyed and go, and just swing right down. I nearly slapped my camera now, but swing right down on Percy with his Rita. And we see that Percy does actually react in time, and base, mind you, block it, and go, huh, and then go, huh, and get slammed away by Escanor, who, at least by the vein probably like, puts in a little bit of effort to do so, and then just lodges him in a wall. Now, is this the best for Percy? Not necessarily, but we'll get into my hopium and copium and how this could still actually be really, really good for Percy, as he is basically removed from the fight here. He does not interact with Escanor again, but you will note that while he did get knocked into the wall, he didn't actually take too much real damage, as we'll see later on. And we see after the kablam hits, Lance goes, Percy! As Percy comes into the wall, and Tristan lunges in going, huh? And slashes up Escanor's arm. Alright, base. First, I thought I may have been tweaking, because, you know, occasionally, your boy may be tweaking and one of the... No, base Tristan. Look at him. Look, there ain't a lick of trust killing in them eyes. Base Tristan thought it was a good idea to run up against Escanor, who literally just loses his clothes and grabs Tristan by the face. Kicks Tristan and go... as he's face grabbed, and immediately slammed to the ground. Now, he is also removed from the context of the fight, but you will see later on that this base Tristan also takes basically no damage from this Escanor. They can take that in mind. Rub your toes with it, wiggle your nose with it. Think about it. But, with it being the case, he goes, huh, and slams Tristan down to the ground. And we see Gawain look on in absolute terror as Escanor stands up and begins to walk over. And we see that Lance is like, she really heralded as the world's strongest man. I'm trying to see something. So what you trying to see me for? And immediately Lance walks up and gets swung on and then just weaves through all the Rita attacks. Now, I must remind you, this is a base Lance. Emilia, post to your timescale base Lance. This is a base Lance. No weapon, no sacred treasure amp, no nothing. No magical ore or anything. just super casual base Lance, bobbing and weaving down all of this Escanor's barrage. And you will note that Escanor does not land a single hit on Lance. He lands a hit on every other character, but the only quote-unquote damage Escanor does, or even reaction feat he has, is the unclenching of his abdominals. Because we see Lance does the bob, the weave, the move, the grieve, as the grot zips all around him, and immediately he gets in close to Escanor and says, would have been nice to take on the real one. And he hits the 1-inch punch on Escanor directly into his torso. Very akin to how Lance did the last super tall person who challenged him, Dornog, where he literally transferred back and put a hole in Dornog's belly, which made all of Dornog's other holes start leaking red juice. It was really, really bad. But with it being the case, we see him 1-inch punch this Escanor, notably hand still in pocket, clearly not taking this all too seriously, and if anything, being a little bit too smug and arrogant, as Escanor simply, or this copy goes, how impudent, and then just flexes his stomach right back into position. Straight pure flex there, engaged his core, and engaging his core alone pushes Lance back and literally bounces him off and out of Escanor. And we see that both Gawain, well, not both, but essentially Gawain is absolutely bamboozled to see, one, her father presumably being this strong, and also two, Lance struggling this much. This is the most we've seen Lance struggle, even while Super King is suppressed, in a long, long time. Like, literally part one, long time since we've seen Lance seemingly struggle with anything. But he gets knocked back, and we see that, to much to Lance's annoyance, oh, how, man? That fiend messed up my wrist, which is very interesting, right? Like, obviously, Lance isn't wielding the full power of the lake at the same time, or at all times, as far as we know. And presumably you can't release Shining Road without releasing, or like a full absolute power Shining Road without releasing literally everything. But Lance technically does take damage off this interaction, but his wrist is messed up, right? He essentially has to hit one of these real quick. And I wouldn't say that this Escanor taking a hit from this very clearly disinterested and super giga base Lance jacks up everything on its own. However, we do see as Lance goes, oh man, Fiend messed up my wrist. He sees the Percival sword in the air, grabs it because he doesn't have a sacred treasure, neither does Tristan, neither does Gawain, and you're gonna be like, but what about Lita though? What about Lita? When was the last time that sword appeared? I know it was in the Fighting Field Sword. Don't have to worry correctly. But still, I hope that woman gets a new sacred treasure. But that aside, Lance sees, I was gonna say Percy's replacement. No, sees the Percival sword in midair. Is like, well, shoot, man. It was made by Dubs, so it's close enough. And he grabs it, twirls it, and then immediately aims it at Escanor, blasting him with a Shining Road. Now, is this the largest Shining Road we've seen in the series? No, it's actually smaller than the first name one I'm pretty sure we got. At least that's what it seems like. Maybe just the panel's cutting it off. But at the same time, I don't think I really had to think this. I don't think I had to think anything else through this chapter more than to think this one, right? Because ultimately, this is the, do we have to redo the whole scaling thing? As we'll find out later on, this Escanor is inferior to the original. Not in no way inferior to the original, like some copies are. No, it is inferior to the original flat out. And for all intents and purposes, this Shining Road, coming from at least a Dub's creation, if not a Dub's Sacred Treasure tier weapon or item, should boost Lance's base capacities up enough that even if he's without ore, this should do a lot of damage for someone of Escanor's tier if he was still Zelda's food. But within the case, we see Escanor literally stand there in the blazing light and go, how impudent. And immediately Lance is like, are you really an illusion? As this Escanor launches out a cruel sign. So, obviously, here is where I have to huff the meanest, thickest, juiciest copium of the entire chapter. What I'm going to say is, you may be like, man, if you don't want to throw out the scaling, just say that. I'm going to say it right now. I don't want to throw out all the scaling. So, to interpret this, specifically Lance getting a Dubs made tier, or at least piece of Dubs equipment, essentially, and also imbuing his most powerful, will supposedly surpass Nemesis in a few years, and then, it's been more than a few years since he got the Lake to Power Shining Road. I think, ultimately all this does is kind of reinforce the gods still being relevant. Because let's think about this, right? Who have we seen base, like a Giga, no aura, nothing, just casual hand in pocket? Who have we seen that Lance fight? Carther? Yeah. But we do know he was only really doing damage to base regular Carther, which still you could, back in the day, you could make arguments that, oh, well, being relative at all to any version of Carther, who we thought was Arthur at the time, should make you above, like, literally every single deity ever, because, you know, DM Mel was, or base Mel was struggling when base Mel was bullying the Demon King when he was just at 50% as old as his body. Like, there definitely is a ceiling chain you can go down. My purest, meatiest, heftiest, juiciest copium is specifically the idea that, one, this isn't actually a proper weapon. It's a seal, meaning it probably doesn't have the full efficacy of an actual sacred treasure tier weapon that was made to be made a weapon. I think that ultimately, brain, where's I going with that? Oh no, I'm helping copium. Essentially, the Shining Road not being as big as it could be because the Percival Sword is a poor conduit for Lance's power when he's expressing it through Shining Road. There is that. We know he can go bigger. We know he can flare his aura up. We know he can add more to it. I don't think this necessarily invalidates anything. I think this, once again, just reinforces that the gods are still meta relevant, because if I had to pick a guess of where this Escanor would probably scale, just in comparison to like a really casual Lance, is very specifically, I'd probably put him around this area. I mean, I don't know, because the thing is, right, with the eating of the sacred treasure, Nanashi was able to do that because of goddess biology and the attack being slow enough to light. Escanor was able to do that by just, you know, being Escanor. So I'm very 50-50 on it in theory, but I think in execution, I don't think this jacks up anything. I just think the deities are still relevant, because I believe this Escanor, that's why I was going down. So you don't record with EB kids because you forget your point. Essentially, I believe this Escanor is meant to be Final Shine Escanor. Now, talked about it a little bit earlier. If you don't know Final Shine Escanor, let me give you a quick breakdown. Oh, you see this? See that keyblade back there? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you see Oblivion, nice and clean, nice and smooth, nice and buttery, ain't it? Yeah. You see that Kingdom Key right there? See that Kingdom Key? That Kingdom Key is Escanor to a majority of the series. Final Shot Escanor is no name up there, or the Gazing Eye up there. Essentially, my point is, two completely different characters. One wouldn't scale the deities at all, and would be really, really weird that if this Zeldris food could spontaneously tank Shining Roads, when Shining Roads have been shown to do damage to Carther, when we still thought it was Arthur, but still human Carther, like it was enough to actually make Chaos pop out and go a little bit crazy. And that was 2 years ago. Meanwhile, Lance should be stronger even in his more casual state. But with the idea of the gods still being relevant in mind, and this Escanor presumably being based off a Final Shine Escanor, it does make more sense that he could kind of just tank this, because we should, like, assuming that this character is relative to the deities. We saw that Nanashi, who, thanks to his god's biology, had an innate resistance to Shining Road, was able to heal through it. And Escanor should be above Nanashi, as Nanashi was like 4 Archangels level. And we know that Final Shine Escanor was well above that, because he was actually able to fight the Prime Demon King at all, which is something Mael glazed him for, because like, he's like, I couldn't even consider doing that, he's literally a god. So, ultimately, I think this does just reinforce gods still being relevant to the meta. Do I think any of the gods could take down Lance? Not really. Like, presumably, he'd find a way, like, he'd probably just physically bully the Demon King after powering up fully. And I think he could actually eventually break through the divine power of the 10 wings just through sheer chip damage alone, because he literally does have infinite magic. So I do think that this does not suddenly invalidate. I've seen people go absolutely wild with this and be like, obviously none of the Four Knights actually scale to any of the sins at all, because this Escanor is weaker than the original Escanor, and the original Escanor didn't even appear in the Cath fight, and since he didn't appear in the Cath fight, he's stuck there with the Godfathers, and the Godfathers don't scale to anything, not even like 20% like, I think this a nasty domino effect that doesn't necessarily make sense nor pan out, because this possibly Final Shine Escanor equivalent, just based on, you know, being able to tank the Shining Road, something that was able to nearly slaughter an Archangel tier character, even with the resistance to it. I think that, plus what the next interaction does, proves that our knights still definitely do scale to the sins, but not obviously the peak of the sins in the way that a full power Lance does. Because we see that this Escanor launches a Cruel Sun out at Lance, and immediately this should do something, right? Not to Lance, as Lance's hazy moon is presumably would just absorb and negate this entirely. But we see Gawain say, "Stop this already!" as she teleports in front of the sun. And then as Escanor's pointing in shock to see her, immediately she swings back with a passionate sun, completely neutralizing the cruel sun and causing a dual explosion, a massive kaboom. Poor Tristan, poor Percival, you can see they've still taken basically no damage. So, if this Escanor was truly so far above all the four knights and they don't actually scale them at all, and this, that, and the third, and this, blah, 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 they wouldn't neutralize here. Why would a named attack from Escanor be lesser than his like regular punches, or not scaled to his durability at all? Gawain, who should have at least some scaling to the chaos amped 4 evils, and then at least according to Lance should be able to go relative with the giga chaos amp 4 evils, who we see even base Diane begin to handle properly with proper information and intel and actual experience. Meanwhile, Lance says with actual proper utilization of their intel and experience, they could have possibly beaten the Super Giga Chaos Amp 4 Knight or 4 Evils. I think this is sort of just re-establishing the precedent and bringing the gods back into relevance, if we're assuming that this is Final Shine Escanor in particular that's being modeled based on Alden's Analyze, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But off these two neutralizing, off Percy and Tristan having taken very minimal damage from someone who's supposedly going to give out impossible death, base Tristan, mind you, I don't think this suddenly annihilates all scaling. Like I said, I think it just brings the gods back into relevance because this is probably based off Final Shine Escanor, the last scan that Alden had to do. However, at the same time, this Escanor is wielding Sacred Treasure and is, fitted up in his very specifically Invasion of Camelot arc fit. So maybe you argue that's the last interpretation. And then that technically causes more problems because that Escanor is Zelda's food. Not really good. But at the same time, that one being Zelda's food just makes the tanking the Shining Road kind of weird just because, Zelda's food. But at the same time, I think it's just Final Shine. And I think our cast is just a good chunk stronger than you'd think. Obviously, none of them outside of Lance are stand at the peak of the sin level. But yeah, shock horror, I think the guys who have been proven to be greater than Gother easily based on their interactions with Beltreep at close range, and notably not even Super Giga and Beltreep, but regular Beltreep at close range, or base Chaos and Beltreep. Yeah, no doubt, I think Percy and Tristan are strong enough to interact with a guy who should probably be around that level and take very minimal damage from. Once again, they take no damage at all this chapter from Escanor. But speaking of Escanor, he does go on to brutally maug his daughter, as we see his daughter has decided to try and go maug for maug, and she goes, "Don't you dare claim not to know me! It's me, Gawain! Your darling Gawain, the one you love so much!" Which, I was gonna clown her for this, but she is right. We do know Escanor heavily doted over his daughter. We still, because it happened so fast, I didn't fully go into the whole consent thing of this. I think I did maybe a little bit when I was initially reading the chapter. But man, do I hope Escanor had some say in this before Merlin just made a whole child and said, "Yeah, this is yours." Man, I do hope Escanor got to choose his own body. It wasn't just forced into that dinosaur rubber thing because Merlin found it most convenient to hide their identities. And I know Escanor's the kind of man who would kowtow to his woman at any opportunity. And if anything, he probably wanted a child with Merlin. But still, the vagueness of the whole consensuality of this whole resummoning, making baby from your matter, possibly without your consent, I don't know. I feel like the soul was summoned after Gawain was properly created. Even if she was very, very young then. But obviously, Gawain, having known her father through her grandfather, knows that if this truly were Escanor, he wouldn't even be able to hit her. As she says, "Take us over to Mom right now! Or don't tell me you're going to punch out your own beloved daughter? Can you even? I bet you can't." Now, unfortunately, as much as I've been glazing, and someone could argue I've been coping for the Four Knights and their scaling, man, Gawain, if you've had Gawain repped as the weakest knight for a while now, I feel like this chapter does definitely support your decision, because we see Gawain, at least not in full tyrant mode, but in a pretty decently empowered mode by Dawn, standing up to her father, daring him to swing on her, and then Escanor just swings on her and punches her directly in the face. And notably, in comparison to Percy, who was thrown into the wall and took no visible damage, in comparison to Tristan, who was slammed against the ground after being grabbed by the face and took no visible damage, and obviously Lance, who hurt his own wrist on Escanor while Super Giga nerfed in base, takes absolutely no real visible damage. But then Gawain, who's able to at least neutralize the passionate and cruel son, not the passionate and cruel son, is able to neutralize anything with Dawn. Not neutralize literally anything, but you know what I mean when I say that. Essentially, she was able to cancel out the cruel son with her passionate son. She does do the worst against this Escanor, ironically. She gets punched directly in the face. Not only does not react, unlike previous characters, right? Like, we do see Percy react to him. He reacts to Escanor explicitly as Escanor swings, which is good for Percy's speed scaling. And then Tristan's in base. I'm not going to slander base Tristan all too much. And he was able to at least tear through Escanor's clothes while in base, which is still not the worst feat out there. But with it being the case, we see that, you know, this Escanor seemingly doesn't care. It just knocks Gawain down. And we see that Lance is like, hey, already explained this to you, Twinsky. Again, it's not really him. Stop trying to reason with him. And obviously Gawain, too enamored by the idea that she could be meeting her actual father for the real time in the first time. That is so backwards. For the first time in the real time, yeah, she's probably a bit paranoid on how he should operate, essentially. Like, she's in a very strange position. And obviously, the ideas of her grandfather that she had, which was always Escanor, and the actual Escanor laid in front of her, yeah, absolutely two contradictory ideas, and she gets kicked in the face for it. But, with it being the case, we see that as she crashes, she goes, he kicked me, which, indeed he did. You ever been beat before? Yeah, this is typically how parent-child relationships go. No, I'm kidding. It shouldn't. If that's happening to you, do something. But, with being the case, we see that Percy and Tristan, who have maybe some dirt marks and, like, minor scuff marks on them, are like, ugh. And obviously, we see Tristan go, I don't like where this is going, as he's the one who knows Gawain the best, and sees that if the head's coming down, the tears are about to come down too. And she goes, ah! Zeus! You promised me the destruction. Wait, no. Not you promised me the destruction of Olympus. I bring the destruction of Olympus! She goes, immediately breaks down into tears. And once again, pretty darn heavy bleed, like I would say. Especially in comparison. Like, I get why, funnily enough, Gawain is unfortunately suffering. Oh, Gawain is currently suffering from the Gother effect, where, at least for right now, next to Percy, she still is the most hacked out of our main cast. And thusly, we kind of can't give her too many great stats. Obviously, she still has more power stored away in Dawn and stuff like that, so she's probably still fine and has, like, more Dura and bulk later on. But for her to be the only one to take this much damage after an interaction with Escanor, when the other cast got some dirt on their face, or minor scratches at most, and Lance took no damage at all, outside of, oh no, my wrist, I punched something hard and wasn't paying attention to how hard it would be. Ayo. Like, ultimately, it actually does look really, really rough. And we see her immediately break down and go, Dad hit me! And he kicked me! He never really loved me at all! Which, very, very an understandable reading, though. Like, especially, I still remember the first time that I was disciplined, and I was like, but you said you loved me so many times. Why am I getting the belt? Why? But, like, hey, I'm not encouraging it. I ultimately think you should be able to communicate with your children and shouldn't have to resort to violence. But in their defense, it worked on me. I only got beat once by each of my superiors, even though I never got beat by my grandma. So it was effective enough on your Baba Booey boy. But with it being the case, we see that Gawain absolutely loses it here. She was not expecting the first meeting with her father, for real, to go like this. And obviously, meeting what could be her father for the first time allows her to completely ignore all the context Lance is giving her and the explanations. Lance is just seen ore farming this chapter, though. I'm not sure what this, like, wind swirling around him is. Presumably, it may be Merlin, as she does also form out of one of these clouds, or it could just be regular Camelot stuff, as this Escanor was forged out of that. But Lance goes, oh, this stupid brat, bro. What I have to deal with this? I'm getting too old for this. I'm sick and tired of it. I'm literally the youngest person here chronologically. Why am I the leader? And we see that Gawain goes to immediately swing on Escanor, and at least this Escanor does not instantaneously respond. Presumably it is actually processing the information is being fed, as it did give very clear instructions all the way at the start. As Gawain goes, I hate you, Dad! I hate you! Stupid muscle-bound freak! Wait, no, I need to make sure I have the full thing here. Stupid muscle-bound mustache freak! As she swings and batters him down. But with it being the case, we see that Percy's like, huh, First time in a while, huh? Which is true. I think the last time Gawain had like a dramatic crying breakdown was very specifically against Pelgard. Literally 2 years ago in their universe, and what is it, like 5 years ago now? 4 maybe? Like it's been a long while since Gawain had her last like mid-battle crash out. But with it being the case, we see Tristan and Percy once again not taking the battle too seriously. I'm gonna go into the scaling stuff again in a second. Hopefully I'm gonna be more coherent this time. I feel like a little bit more conscious. But essentially, Tristan and Percy, while scuffed a little bit, didn't really take too much damage. Neither of them even bothered to heal it off. And Tristan was in base, and Percy had no aura. But you know what I know what I mean when I say Percy had no aura. You know what I mean when I say Percy had no magical aura. Or I know aura means magical aura. You know what I mean. But still, it feels weird saying Percy had no aura. It's true, but it just didn't sound right. But with it being the case, we see that the blood that came out of Gawain does splatter against Escanor, this copy, and Escanor goes, and after he grabs the wrist, he begins to shake and falter and go, didn't. And he spontaneously disappears into a twirling cloud of mist. He's gone. The Escanor feats are, they're fine. Like, once again, taking the Shining Road is the most impressive thing. But even then, not necessarily the most insane thing based on, especially if this is a Final Shine Escanor. In fact, honestly, you would kind of want it to be the Zelda Food Escanor for the interactions with Percy and Tristan. And even Gawain, and you'd want it to be Final Shine to justify the Shining Road interaction, but I'm going to give like a full scaling consensus on this and what I think this chapter means for the scaling, and I do want to know your thoughts down below if you all agree with me. It will end up agreeing with me or not agreeing with me. But obviously this Escanor fades away into one of these swirling clouds that we see surrounding Lancelot as well this chapter. They just seem to be swirling about. And we see that naturally, Lance even is a little bit bamboozled as he goes, wait a sec, he's gone? Huh. Well, he did ask you to show him your blood. Didn't think it'd be that literal. And we see that Tristan goes, sure was strong for an illusion, though. And Percy goes, ouch. Yeah, maybe even more so than the real thing. And once again, they both had an interaction with this Escanor. Not only was Percy able to flat out react, but Tristan was in base. And I wouldn't say these characters, without their magical auras and without any of their transformations, scale all too high. So yeah, them taking damage from Final Shine Escanor or even any version of Escanor, just fine. Doesn't necessarily jack up any of their scaling so far, just because of where they should scale. Let's even, especially in these super low power states. But we see that at the sheer idea that Escanor could be equal to the original, Nakama steps in with WOM, Word of Merlin, which might as well be direct word from the author, because she writes the plot, as she goes, it was no mere illusion. Or she, the Alton Ball, that she's presumably hiding behind, as we see Gawain turn in shock, and Alden begins to speak, or so be it, or so seem it, as we see that Merlin explains, one trait of my sacred treasure, the Morning Star Alden, is known as Analyze. I crafted that with the power of Camelot, based on the analyzed physical abilities of Escanor himself. He is the most powerful guard in the world. Of course, the body, much like the magic and sacred treasures, was an artificial creation. None of that could ever hold a candle to the real Escanor. And Lance goes, for real? Which is insane to think about. And this is the final little part of the scaling diatribe I'll go into, and why I ultimately think this was probably based on Final Shine Escanor, but the design is Zelda's Food Escanor. I think Alden would probably go with the last appearance of Escanor when it analyzed, and that would be very specifically Final Shine, just based on the fact that it's not the one Escanor. You could argue, well, shouldn't it be the one ultimate? Probably design-wise, but based on the Escanor, it's either Zelda's Food Escanor or very specifically Final Shine Escanor. For the Knight's interactions with it, does that violate any of their scaling? No. This wasn't a full power Gawain. It was a Gawain who was trying to reason with her father and was specifically off guard and wasn't really expecting to be hit and or kicked. And even then, she only took this much damage. So now I don't think this is insane Escanor upscale. And then on top of that, Percy and Tristan are kind of just caught in the crossfire of these two explosions and took very minimal damage. In fact, you can definitely argue, just based on how they're drawn here, they didn't even really take any visible damage from being tossed into a wall by Escanor and then slammed to the ground by Escanor. What did the most damage was the actual burning clash of two suns that actually blew them up and burned them a little bit. So I don't think this has any secret crazy upscale for Escanor. If anything, Escanor being here just upscales base Tristan and upscales Percy with no magic, as they're able to tank these attacks relatively fine. Especially if you think that's Final Shine Escanor, that's still good upscale for them. And then Gawain, she kind of just gets confirmed as the weakest knight here. I kind of went over that just because she takes the most damage. You can argue she's off guard, but clearly so were Percy and Tristan. They didn't go in seriously at all. No magic aura flare, nothing. So they were relatively calm. Lance and his interactions are what makes this funky. Make me really want to lean towards it being Final Shine Escanor. It being Final Shine Escanor, and then Percy and Tristan essentially both being in base and being able to tank his attacks is kind of, or no, that, yeah, them being able to tank his attacks and then Lance being able to do no damage to Shining Road is kind of insane. Remember, Shining Road, according to the Lady of the Lake herself, who should be a pretty reputable source, as she literally ate the attack, she's like, hey, yeah, in a few years, your Shining Road will literally surpass Nemesis. It's been a few years and he's fueled by infinite magic. Presumably, his Shining Road should be beyond Nemesis level, but at the same time, we know his Shining Road doesn't immediately eviscerate anything and everything, and he can control the output to some degree, despite how much magic he can put into it. So I think Escanor no selling it makes me want to believe it's Final Shine Escanor, and it's just upscale for the 4 knights, and it does sort of like soft hard. It feels weird to say soft hard, but like soft hard confirm the gods are still relevant, because if this is Final Shine Escanor, then congratulations, the sins are able to go relative with a character who was relative to the deities, so they can take hits and that from that level. Or you go with the idea that this is Zelda's food Escanor, and Lance was just really sandbagging, which, hey, no aura, no flexing, a pseudo weapon in the Percival sword, considering its sword is ultimately not necessarily meant to be a sword, it's meant to be part of a seal. So I think even with the statement that this illusion doesn't hold a candle to the real Escanor, I don't think that suddenly means that Lance is fodder and not even sent here. I still think Lance at full power is presumably the strongest being around right now. No sacred treasure. Just because of the sheer output he has. Just give him a weapon. He'll probably just cop it off you. And then on top of that, I don't think suddenly all the knights are now commandment fodder. I don't think they're all instantaneous Zelda's food. It depends on what Escanor you think this is. And once again, none of that could ever hold a candle to the real Escanor. I mean, you could do some crazy upscale from that. Like I mentioned, Tristan didn't even activate Triskelion. Percy didn't even bother to flare up the aura or actively properly use the nature of the Four Circular. Gawain didn't go full power and was trying to reason. Like, ultimately, every single character has an excuse for how poor they did against a being that couldn't hold a candle to the real Escanor, supposedly. And not even like a built-in excuse of like, oh, I'm coping. No, like the narrative goes out of its way to show us base Tristan and no magic Percy lunging in to fight Escanor for some reason, because occasionally they're dumb. And then, person meeting Mother for the first time, essentially, is a little bit excited to meet Mama. But with it being the case, all that to say, the gods are still relevant. Pendleman, you've been talking about the point, but how's that true? I think if this is Final Shine Escanor, and that Final Shine Escanor is able to tank a regular Shining Road from a pseudo weapon, I think the deities could probably do it too, because if we're going with the idea that the deities should at least somewhat, somewhat still be relevant just based on this Escanor's interactions with these 4 knights, then the full power deities should definitely be able to go absolutely buku bonkers, considering that meta-wise, they haven't been outdone too heavily in terms of hacks, and stat-wise, they should still be relevant if the cast is still, dealing with Zelda's food and or Final Shine Escanor. But with it being the case, outside of Lance getting a for real comment and about that not being the real Escanor, we see that Merlin goes, "Forgive my rough welcome, Knights of Prophecy. It's all for the sake of protecting my secrets." And we see Gawain naturally turn and be like, "Mama?" And Merlin poses up and is like, "Yes, I refuse to pay child support, even though I literally supported your existence. But I am Merlin, the boar sin of gluttony from the 7 deadly sins. And I am now ready to reveal the truth to you." Presumably the truth about Arthur. And possibly even the truth about the future kids being here, because that probably is something to do with Merlin. But overall, a W chapter. I'll definitely make a more in-depth scale video for 7deadlysins, where I think certain characters stand generally. I may have to just do a tier list. Yeah, it's been a while. I think I may just do a 4 Knights tier list, including original 7deadlysins characters and where I think they still stand. I'm now, personally based off this chapter alone, I'm now in the camp that the gods are still relevant. that the Chaos family's introduction, while it did power creep the gods, it didn't completely remove certain characters from relevancy. Escanor being left behind and not scaling to any of the sins by the time of the Cath fight, it was always pretty nonsense, and I think it's only further nonsense by this Escanor being at all relevant against these characters, especially Lance of all characters, who even in base was able to bully Chaos King Carther. There we go. There's the more logical skill. I have to go down. I'll make a tier list fully breaking down where my thoughts on everything stand. I do like the character interactions here. While this isn't the real Escanor, it is nice to see our characters bounce off the original Escanor, if admittedly some stupid ways, like Percy and Tristan going in with no problem, and Lance still clearly sandbagging when he of all people should know that he probably shouldn't sandbag too much against this Escanor guy. And then on top of that, seeing Gawain get her interaction with Escanor, it is adorable. I hope she gets to talk with her real father. Like, Merlin, please summon your husband? Question mark? Please summon his soul back here for a little bit so Gawain can actually talk with her daddy while she's here. And not just you, but overall, a W chapter. We hit it for the 2 times. If you made it all the way in this video, please do me a favor and leave passionate cruelty. I like that. Leave passionate cruelty in the comment section down below. I want to thank you so much for watching. Just leave a like, share, comment, and subscribe. Make sure that leads to notifications so you don't miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, even have a page down below. You support me for as low as $1 a month to get things like exclusive videos, early content, and more. Also, now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Some of those perks include live reactions to the shoes I'm to review, ad variations of all my videos, early ad free access to all my videos, early ad free access not just all my videos on the main channel, but all my videos on the second channel that called the reaction. Link in the description down below, along with a link to my Twitch. I stream every Friday, 8 p.m. is Tizzle. Oh, also, pages of members get access to, like, the 30-minute live reaction for this review and all previous and future Fortnite live reactions. That is all there for pages of members. And I do have my Twitch down below. Stream every Friday, 8 p.m. is Tizzle. And my Ko-Fi down below, where you drop 5 views to a short video, 20 minutes long video, or any means at all. Any support is always greatly appreciated. But now, I want to thank you so much for watching, and hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with the Pencil, writing off. I'd like to give a thank you to our sketch tier members: Eternal Flame, Redwolf 4765, Astro, Glacier XZ, Zera, J2MA, Buddha Ura, Yuki Ally, Grim, Ollie, Corey Watson, Damon Brown, Tim Thomas, Kaving, RXN, Dead Meme, Kian Stewart, Edwin Igbinoba, Straw, Antavius Mitchell, Super Flame Zero, Weary Exile, Alex Kenny, Todd, The Practical One, Landon Clapwick, Heath Nelson, CAET, Plant Crone, Brandon Payne, Multi-Batman Superman, Zalim, Sleepin' John, The Young Family, Pastel Pandora, Mo City King DKG, Akolade Babatunde, Union Eye, Athenzi Shear, Sino King, CCC, Enzo, Kitty Liddy, Axis XC, Praise the Sun, Magic, Andrine Bonnet, Scion, John Malcolm, Black Doctor Strange, Donovan McIntosh, at JDog2656, Aswin Hedi Presetia, Sheesh King, Yo Extras, and AZ Void. Then I'd like to thank you to our line art tier patrons: Dread Zoen, Kevin Encarnacion, Lucas Stace, Midnight Lord 21, and Sean. Then I'd like to give a thank you to our Ink tier member, Shrimpo the Fourth Shrimp 06. And I'd like to give a thank you to our digital art tier member, J Warrior. Then I'd like to give a thank you to our colored art tier patrons, Walking Munoz and Walking Munoz.